Greetings, comic friends. It has been a little while since I've done sort of a more informative video as it pertains to comic collecting. So I thought I'd do that today. And I hope this helps out some people in making buying decisions, things that they may want to or not want to purchase, or at least being able to get a better idea, or say, pay the right amount for some things that they are thinking about buying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some books and I'm going to go over the type of things I look for when I'm looking to purchase a book. Like if I'm at a store or if I'm at a convention, whenever there is a book I'm interested in that has some amount of value to it or that I want in my collection. Sometimes like little filler stuff like $2-3 books I'm not as worried about. But if anything is I don't know, 15, 20, 30 bucks and up, I'll usually look for these sorts of things. And different books have different things to look for. So whenever you're in that position, you should not hesitate to, with permission of course, to take the book out of the bag and take a closer look at it. Take a look closer at the front, take a closer look at the back, take a closer look at the interior. Of course, be sure to ask. Don't just go opening up books. I've never had someone say no, and if someone does say no, then you probably don't want to buy that book or buy from them because they're probably hiding something. And a lot of times when I ask to look in, to open a book up, I'll have them open it just to mitigate any possible risk of tape stuff. If I open it myself with this, if they say go ahead and open it, I'll be sure to do the whole. I'll take the tape off the bag and stick it on like the table or something like that. So when I take the book out of the bag, that's how I open all of my books. Just so there's no chance of getting it stuck to the tape. But I'll always ask, do you want to open it to the seller? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they say no, it's okay. So I do, but always ask, always ask. But I'm going to go over some stuff that I look for when deciding to buy a book. And I see a lot of this sort of stuff when I have customers that send me things that they want worked on, and as I do intake or as I'm working on the book, I'll see something that's like, I have a feeling that they don't know about this. Because either they wouldn't have sent it in to get worked on if they knew that this like defect was on it, or in it. And a lot of times I'll reach out to my customer before I start actually working on it and say, hey, did you know this is there? Because it might not be worth getting this, clean, pressed, and sent in for grading because this, huge color breaking crease is down it, or it's missing a page or something. So then if they don't actually want it, then I can return it to them and not charge them for the work if that doesn't best suit their needs. But these are just the sort of things that again I look for. I see that some of my customers often miss. I'll also say that if you open a book and see some sort of defect in it, don't presume that the seller knew about it and tried to hide it from you. You go to some of these sellers, whether they're big stores or the conventions, and you see the amount of books that they have. They have a lot of books to process. They unfortunately don't always have the time to go over each individual issue with a fine-tooth comb. I understand that. I think everyone needs to understand that. But if you as an individual are looking at some books, a handful of books, you're not looking at tens of thousands of books, you're looking at maybe 5, you definitely have the time. So take that time to do it. Now, I've done this with sellers and opened it up and found something that because of what it was priced at, I suspect they didn't know about and take it into account. Because like if this, this defect was on it, then it definitely should not be priced this. But it may be something I still want. And I'll talk to them. I'll say, hey, I don't know if you know this is there. Can we work on the price? Because you kind of have it priced like as if it wasn't there. So can I get this for whatever this other amount that I think it's actually sort of worth? So this isn't just to screen things and say, no, I don't want this. It's to make sure that you are paying an appropriate amount. Don't get overcharged for something because there's a defect that you and the seller didn't know about. And again, I've had this happen multiple times with multiple sellers, and it's just a lot of times they just don't know, and they're happy to work with you. I've never had a bad experience. I've never had a seller say, no, you can't look at the book, or take something into account. I mean, sometimes they bought the book and they didn't know about it, and they can't price it much lower because they didn't know it was there, and they paid a price for it. Yeah, so I'm gonna change the view. I'm gonna move this down to my workspace where I can kind of give a better view of books, and we'll take a look at some of the things that I look for when buying books. Hello. All right, let's see how this works. I'm trying a different camera angle. Usually when I'm down in my workspace, I have to have the camera completely out of my way because I'm working, but I'm trying to do a normal first-person perspective with this. So let's see how it works. So I'm going to start with looking at modern books. First thing, particularly with Marvel and some DC, you have to be careful. What you need to make sure you look for on the inside is the sticker that covers the digital code to get the free digital copy of the book. Now, if it's missing, not all hope is lost. They can be reattached. I do have a video that talks about how to reattach these stickers. So if you do have one or come across one that maybe it's a really good deal, it just doesn't have the sticker, it's actually not that big of a deal, but it's something that you should know about. So check out that video. I'll try to remember to put a link to it in the description here. I'm sure I'll forget, but I'll try. That talks about how to reattach these from another book. Another thing you have to look out for in modern books, particularly with Marvel books, and I unfortunately couldn't find a really good example of this in any of the books I have at hand, because it's something that I always look for, even on my new books off the shelf. Let me see how well. You have to be really careful about the spines. Let's see if I can get that to focus on the... It's probably not going to do it. Cool. Let's see. What if I did this? This is not helping. All right. That's okay. My example isn't super great anyway. This example actually isn't that bad. You just can't see it. So something you have to look out for, maybe you can kind of see it there. Focus for a second. Is looking for the corners either being blunted, or a lot of times right here on the corner, the top or the bottom, you'll see some split where the front and the back cover are actually coming apart a little bit at the spine. The top of this is actually pretty good. This one has it a little bit. You can kind of see how it's white there, where, and you're going to get a little bit of white because there's a crease that's being put on a single cover. but sometimes you'll see an actual full split of the spine that you have to look out for. Let me see if this other one has it better, at least more visible. Sort of digging through Marvel books I haven't filed away yet, because those usually are worse. There, I think you can kind of see that a little bit better. How you can see that white at the top. This is the top corner. I'd bring it in closer, but if I do, it's just going to unfocus and you're not going to see it at all. And this is actually fairly minor, but sometimes you can see it split, you know, I wouldn't say a full inch, but a half inch or so. So something to look out for. And especially with modern books, I feel that it is more of an issue with those, and it will also hurt grade more on modern books than it will on your older books. The next modern thing you want to look out for and this is the big rule. The big rule of looking at books, always look at the back. Modern books in particular, more modern books, where the back of them is fully printed. On a lot of older books where it's mostly white with something printed on it. But especially when there's black, you have to watch out for that color rub. So we see that down here. There's actually a little bit of it on the top right here. This just happens in storage and shipping when the raw books are stacked on top of each other and they rub up against each other. Sometimes you'll see it on the front of books because what was on the back of the one on top of it rubbed off on it. So you'll see that sometimes. This isn't a really bad example of color rub. I've seen really bad ones, especially some of the Star Wars books for some reason, where there's this, well, it's not always a Star Wars book, but a Marvel book that has a Star Wars ad on the back where there's a lot of black. You'll see a lot of it all up and down that black there. So another thing to look out for. This can hurt grade, so be careful of that. Sometimes it's really, really hard to avoid. A lot of times when you get a 9.6 instead of a 9.8, it might be because a bunch of that color rub. That's not to say that you can have zero, you can't have any color rub and still get a 9.8. The exact amount that's allowed, I don't know, but it is something to look out for. This has a little bit of it in the corner, right there, as well. Well, I have a modern book out. I couldn't find a great example of it. At least that was visible. But something else that you want to look for on some modern books are what are called reader's creases. So if you were to grab this cover and be reading it very casually, not being careful with it, it's very possible, it's very easy to, if you bend the cover up like this, to when you press, oh, you can't see, sorry. In this, okay. So if you're to open the book like this, and if you're not used to handling comics, or people that aren't used to handling comics, they'll take their thumb, and when they pull it back, they'll press it in like that while they pull it back. And it could be towards on the edge, it could be up here, but it will leave a little crescent. It may not always be color breaking, but it may be deep enough that it can't be pressed out. So be on the lookout for those, and you see those a lot on modern books today. I have an example that has them, but it's on a white cover, so I know it's definitely not going to show up. But what you want to do to see those, and see general imperfections, it's why I always have a light like really close to my workspace, is get things under a light, and those little creases that you don't see normally will show up really well under direct light. And this doesn't really have any issues with the front of it, so I don't have a great example. to show, but just something that you should do. Look out for those little reader creases. They're sometimes hard to find because they're real small, but they're always in the shape of a little crescent, like it could be someone's thumb or finger where they bent in the cover while they were opening it, or it can be on pages, individual pages as well. But I always get under a spot of bright light and just kind of go like that to look and have the light directly hit every part of the book. So some things that you don't see under just a normal lighting gets missed. All right, so let's talk about some older books. Where do we want to start? In this sort of thing, you don't see a lot in more modern books, because this usually happens when books have been stored for a long time incorrectly, probably in shops, right? They didn't sell all the copies of it, so it got stored alongside a bunch of other stuff raw. If you take a look at this book, it doesn't look bad from the front. I mean, there's some issues with it. It's got some color breaking or whatever, but as far as it being sort of square, it doesn't look that bad. But if we flip it over, we can see, maybe, I might have to move here. We can see, there we go, that's a better, you see the interior pages popping out there? This has a very slight spine roll to it. The spine is slightly out of adjustment. So the back cover is shifted over a little bit, so that's why you're seeing the interior pages. If you look at the bottom, I think you can see it a bit there. Yeah, you can see it a bit there too. So whenever you see that the interior pages coming out, especially this much up here, you got a bit of a spine roll. Now, when most people think of spine roll, they usually think of when you see that big, nasty, like it's just curved up. And that's definitely spine roll. But a more minor spine roll is like the spine itself looks fine. It's just off a little bit. And I don't know how well you can tell. You can see that this staple here is higher than the bottom staple. Not by much, but it's a little bit higher. It's probably hard to see on camera. Now this is addressable. It is fixable. I don't think I've done a video on this. It's probably one I should do at some point. Not everything is a good candidate for having the spine roll fixed, because it does put a lot of stress on the spine. But it is something that can be addressed. But you wouldn't tell just from a quick look at the front. I mean, on closer inspection, you can see the staples aren't exactly aligned, but at a glance, it looks fine. So another case of look at the back so you can get all perspectives. All right, what do we have next? While we're talking about spine, where is it? Okay, I have a couple examples of this. When it comes to your thicker books with square bound covers, you want to make sure to check the spine for how square it is. So here, got an X-Men 137. If we look at the center of the spine, it doesn't look too bad. If I can get it to focus. Oh, you had it for a second. just want to focus on the there. Kind of. It doesn't look too bad, but what you really want to make sure you look at is the very ends, especially at the bottom. You can see that this is much thinner here. Oh, it's nice when I put my hand up there, it focuses better. It's thinner here than it is in the center because this has been crushed, right? And this does have it at the top as well. This is a little bit thinner. It's a bit worse at the bottom, but you can notice this is thinner here than it is where the 75 cents is listed. And this is from it being stored and overpacked, where there's a lot of books being packed in together. And a lot of times books are stored they're all facing out, right? But this behind that, behind that, behind that, and so on. And what that does is it makes so all the spines are on the same side when it's stored. And there's more going on the spine than there is on this side, on the open side, where this is where staples are. This is where it gets thick and can get crushed because it has the glue in there. So being under so much pressure by being tightly packed with other books, particularly at the bottom, is where these can get crushed pretty bad. I have another example where it's kind of crushed all the way through. I'll get the tape off this one. All right. Again, always completely remove the tape when I'm taking books out. So this one's real bad. So we have a giant-sized creatures, number 1. You can see just by looking at the front that this should be mostly on a square spine. You can see that it is meant to be squared. You can see how it's flat right there. But it's nearly perfectly rounded here. And kind of tough to see. You don't have the best camera for this sort of thing. And then here where it's supposed to say Marvel Comics Group, you can't even barely see it on the spine itself because it's been crushed so completely. So always check that out. Other things to look out for. This has some good examples of it. On the back, you see this like just general dirtiness here. Not so much this right here. This looks like this is some sort of liquid or oil, but that general dirtiness right there. You see these a lot on the backs of books, and a lot of this is rub from a book that was up against it, or when some people are reading it, they're holding the back, and it's the oil, the dirt from their hands, just the natural dirt. Not people are just dirty or whatever, but or dirty people or whatever you want to say, but people just naturally have like stuff that gets stuck to their hands. And you don't see this quite as much on the cover. Number 1. Usually the covers are a lot more colorful, but you will see it in the whites. And if it's on the whites, it's also other places. It's just on the white is where you can see it. So let's see, in the sea and creatures there, you can kind of see it because it's white. You can see it on the white because there's no background to it, but it'll be all over the book. You just really can't see it. This stuff you can get cleaned off, so keep that in mind. If you see a book that has a bunch of this, know that it can mostly be cleaned. Cleaning it off the color spots is a little bit more tricky, but it can be done. So keep that in mind. If you have a cleaner and presser or you clean and press, it's not the end of the world if it has this stuff, but it is very, very common. especially along the back spine. I'll see a lot of books where there's a bunch of this dirt along the spine, but along the white over the bottom and the side and the top, it's fine. But the spine is the most, you see it the most. Second, you'd see it most along the bottom, and then pretty evenly among the side and the top. But those are definitely things you want to look for. Look directly on the spine. And once you see that on the spine, because it's usually more pronounced there, your eye will sort of focus in on it, and you'll see it elsewhere as well. Whereas if you started looking over here, because it's not as defined, your eye might miss it. But you look and see, your eye just becomes trained on it and focused on it. You'll see it on other parts of the book as well. So especially with older books that have white backs, when you look at the back, look along the spine for that. And not the end of the world, can be cleaned. But one of those things to look for. All right. So this is just an example of always look at the back. So this is a really nice looking copy of X-Men 136. It's really clean looking. It's sharp looking. The spine looks good. It looks clean. It looks shiny. So if you saw this in just in a bag, you might think like, wow, this is high grade. This is really high grade. This could be in the 9s potentially. But don't assume because the cover looks really nice that the same is going on in the back. In this case, and I don't know what caused this, but see right there? Those are holes. So, and they go through, even though there's holes into the pages. So something happened with this book where something was probably, I don't know, dropped or something like that on the back. So it got punctured all the way through. And the back itself is really clean. So if you didn't take a look at the back and you bought this, it was priced as if it were high grade, then you send it in to be graded without looking at it, and it comes back with, a much, much lower grade than you expected because, and you look at the notes, like holes in the back. Oh, goodness. Sure enough, holes in the back. Now, I bought this knowing that those were there. I wasn't that concerned about it for this particular issue and for what it cost me. But if you saw this and you opened it, again, if it was priced like it was high grade and you saw that, this is where you'd want to talk to the seller, be like, hey, did you know this was there? If it's a deal breaker for you, then don't worry about it. Just tell them that it's there. If you're still okay with the book having that, make sure you negotiate down a price that takes that into account, because that hurts. But again, just a case of it looks gorgeous from the front. That doesn't mean the back is just as good. And in this case, it's a pretty obvious thing of holes. But you can have a book with a really, really clean front, and the back is just just dirty. So no matter how good the front looks, always look at the back. All right, let's take a look at another. Let's look at the back. This one you may have seen recently on a video of mine. I got this fairly recently. So, Justice League of America, number 64. Again, this is a beautiful, beautiful looking book. The colors are sharp. There's the spine. There's no ticks on the spine. It has a nice gloss to it. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. The back, however, is extremely tan. You can see how tan that is. You can see a little bit of that gunk on the spine, as I was talking about before, but it's not so much on any of the other sides, because this is where it's most commonly found. Again, they're holding their books on the spine. That's where the dirt ends up, and with the pressure against other books along the spine, it's more likely to rub off. But very, very tan on the back, which you might not be able to tell as well from the front. If you really start looking, again, knowing that the back is so tan, if you start paying closer attention to the whites, you can see that they're not bright white, but they're nowhere near as bad as what's going on the back. So I think this is just another case of don't let the front fool you. It's still a beautiful looking book. Given that when I bought this, I knew that it was there, and given the price that it was at, I was okay with it, and I was still happy with the book itself. But maybe for you it's different. Maybe this would have been priced higher, priced too high, and taking a look at the back could have been, well, no, it's a good looking book, but it's too high given for how tan it is back there. Let's see. This, I'm hoping this will show up okay. This is, again, something you see on older books. So when comics were delivered to like newsstands, they were delivered in a similar way as newspapers were. You see them in stacks with a ribbon that goes around them to keep them together. And sometimes that ribbon leaves an impression. And on this copy of Thor 119, there, yeah, you can see it there, right here, in the white a little bit and right there. That is from a news bundling ribbon where this was on the top or the bottom, and it got an impression left all across the book. These are usually pretty easy to see. Sometimes they're not. I've seen them where the impression wasn't as deep as this was, and it really had to hit the light to see it. But when I had this sitting like this, you probably didn't see it. I don't see it. I can kind of see it. I can kind of see it in person on the white because I kind of see the dirt that got pressed in with it, so it has that imprint. But where it is on the brown, I can't see it at all. Yeah, but you notice you can see this. So this is why I always take a book and move it around in the light, right? Because the light shining directly on something, there, can't see it, there, in the light, boom, there it is. You see it. And got two more examples. This time we're going to the interior. This is an example of just make sure you flip through. Just make sure you flip through to see there's nothing weird going on the inside. This is a fairly decent looking copy of Tales of Suspense, number 97. Here's another example of looking at the back. We can see that tanning on the edge. But more disappointingly, this has a completely torn page. It's I don't want to open up all the way to risk putting it even more, but it's up to right about where cap starts, all the way down, where that's totally ripped through. This is a customer's book, and I had to break the bad news to them. I messaged them and was like, "Hey, did you know that this book has a tear in one of the pages?" So just one of those things. Make sure you look at the interior. Make sure there's no big tears or anything like that, because obviously that affects grade and value. As we're talking about the interior of books, we of course have to mention the infamous marble stamps. Let's see. I think I'm too far in this one. Pretty sure this has a marble stamp in it. I'm pretty sure because I received one of these ones that didn't have it. There we go. Marvel value stamp. These, of course, were made at the time to be cut out and collected. So literally cut them out. And there was a book to put them in and all that. But it was a nice little collectible thing that they put in comics, where now, obviously, if it's cut out, it greatly affects the value. It can get a qualified grade, incomplete, and so on. So whenever you are looking at a book that is in this Bronze Age that has Marvel Comics Group across the top, I don't bother memorizing which books all have value stamps. Not all of them do. Not all of them that have the Marvel Comics Group do. I don't bother memorizing which ones do and which ones don't. But what I do is, whenever I have a book that has that, I know it's during that era, so I make sure to check for it. So whenever you see this sort of banner at the top, all the Marvel books at this time had that, it is at least a candidate for having a Marvel value stamp. Open it up and make sure that it is in there. Now again, that doesn't mean that if it's not in there, that it's a horrible book and it's not worth anything. It just means that maybe for you it's a deal breaker. Maybe it should affect, and it definitely should affect the price you pay, because it affects the value and the grade. So be sure to look for that as well. A couple other things that I wanted to mention, I don't have any examples of it, fortunately, is when it comes to graded books. So if you see something that is like a 9.8 or a high grade, always take a close look at the book inside. Remember, you're not paying for the grade, you're paying for the book inside the case, where the grade is supposed to be a reflection of the condition of the book itself. There are times when a book gets damaged during encapsulation. I've seen it. I've seen 9.8s that have a bunch of spine ticks that it should in no way been a 9.8. I've seen books that are 9.8s with dog-eared corners, where the corner is not just color-breaking crease, but the corner is folded down in the slab, and it has a 9.8. That's not a 9.8. Something happened. It got graded a 9.8, and then something likely happened during encapsulation where it got damaged, and then it was just shipped out. So look out for that. Another thing to look out for graded books is the plastic that slab books are in are not UV resistant. So if people are displaying those books, and this happens mostly at comic shops, if they have a slab book or even just a regular book, but I talk about slabs in particular because I think there's this assumption that the book inside the slab, the grade is correct for the book inside the slab, and then that's it. Nothing can happen to it. if it's been sitting on the shelf, especially in front of sun, but even under lights for years, it can cause the colors of the cover to fade. So if you have a nice looking Bronze Age book, Silver Age book, that's graded, I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that, but it's been sitting in sunlight or under lights for a long time, it could become faded. And if you were to crack that book and resubmit it, it would not get that same grade because of the fading. So just something to note when you're buying a slab book. Don't just say, oh, the grade is this. Once it's in the slab or once it's been graded, that's it. Nothing could possibly go wrong. The book in there is guaranteed to be that. That's not always true. Now, most of the time it is, but it is something to look out for. So that's the last example that I have. This is not going over the obvious stuff, right? Of looking for spine ticks and color breaking creases and stamps and things like that. That stuff I think is fairly apparent. But what I wanted to go over today is sort of those things that I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at. And these are the smaller things that I definitely look for when I am looking to buy a book to add to my collection. So that is it, and I hope that was helpful to at least some people. The number one thing, just in general, that I always tell people when looking at books is look at the back. Look at the back. And I understand when you see a shiny book on the shelf and you see the cover and it looks beautiful, your mind, it doesn't think about what it doesn't see sometimes. And it thinks, well, if the front is that pretty, the back must be that pretty. That is not always the case. And any damage done to the back counts just as much as damage done to the front when it comes to grading and value. And same with the interior. But always, always, always look at the back. Because that's where things are that the seller might not realize because they didn't look at the back either or the interior. So if you take anything away from this, anything at all away from this, it's look at the back. Always look at the back. But that's it. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if this is helpful. Maybe this was just super obvious information. I don't know. But I thought maybe it would be helpful for someone. So like, comment, subscribe, and of course, don't forget to make yours Titan. This video was brought to you by Titan Comic Pressing. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Titan Comic Pressing LLC.